My brother Marcus called me the most expensive maid he'd ever had, right in front of James Wright, the tech billionaire, at Elena's charity gala. Everyone laughed. I stood there holding champagne glasses, wearing my practical black dress, while my own family turned me into their punchline. That was 3 months ago. Today, Marcus is facing federal charges, and Elena's husband is filing for divorce. Sometimes the universe has a sense of humor after all. I never planned to be the family's unpaid accountant. It started innocently enough when I graduated from college 8 years ago with my accounting degree from UConn. I was 24, optimistic, and genuinely wanted to help my family through a rough patch. Mom was struggling with dad's medical bills after his massive stroke, drowning in insurance paperwork that made no sense to her. Marcus had just launched his first tech startup and was burning through investor money faster than he could raise it. Elena was newly married to her corporate lawyer husband, pregnant with their first child and completely overwhelmed by managing her substantial trust fund. Everyone needed help, and I was the responsible one. I'd always been the responsible one. In high school, I balanced the checkbook for Mom's small catering business. In college, I helped my roommates file their taxes and manage their student loan payments. Numbers made sense to me in a way they didn't to other people. Problems had solutions, and I was good at finding them. They offered me the converted carriage house on the family estate in Greenwich, Connecticut. 800 square feet of renovated charm on 15 acres of perfectly manicured grounds. Rent-free, they said. Just help out with the books, manage Mom's medical stuff, keep the household running smoothly. It seemed like a blessing. Fresh out of college, no student loans thanks to Dad's life insurance policy. And a beautiful place to live while I figured out my career path. But somehow figuring out my career never happened. There was always another crisis, another emergency that only I could handle. Marcus's startup needed someone who understood both accounting principles and business operations. Elena's financial advisor was charging her 3% annually just to tell her what I could calculate in 20 minutes. Mom's Alzheimer's symptoms were getting worse, and she trusted me to handle the increasing complexity of her medical care and insurance claims. I became their go-to person for everything that required actual work. Financial planning, tax preparation, payroll management, property maintenance coordination, medical appointment scheduling, insurance claim filing, household staff supervision. My days started at 6 in the morning and ended well past midnight. I ate most meals standing in the kitchen between phone calls with medical providers or while reviewing bank statements for discrepancies. For 8 years, I lived in that carriage house, working 70-hour weeks as their unpaid bookkeeper, property manager, elder care coordinator, and general family administrator. I reconciled bank statements for 7 different accounts. I filed quarterly tax returns for Marcus's 3 companies. I managed investment portfolios worth over $2 million. I coordinated medical care for Mom while maintaining detailed records for insurance purposes. I supervised a rotating staff of housekeepers, gardeners, and maintenance workers. Marcus would throw me bonuses when his companies had good quarters. 2,000 here, 3,000 there. Always just enough to make me feel grateful, but never enough to build real savings. Elena would buy me expensive gifts I never asked for. Designer clothes that weren't my style and jewelry that sat unused in my dresser drawer. Guilt gifts I realized later purchased to assuage her conscience about how little they actually paid me. They called it helping family. They said I was so lucky to live rent-free in such a beautiful place, to be surrounded by family who loved me. They reminded me constantly how much they needed me, how lost they'd be without my organizational skills and financial expertise. When I occasionally mentioned maybe getting my own apartment, maybe taking a real job with benefits and a proper salary, they'd look hurt and confused. But Sarah, Elena would say, "This is your home. We're your family. Why would you want to leave us?" Besides, Marcus would add, "You've got it made here. No rent, no utilities, no commute. You're practically living like a millionaire." Except millionaires don't work 70 hours a week for $24,000 annually. Millionaires don't sleep in converted carriage houses while managing multi-million-dollar portfolios for other people. Millionaires don't spend their Friday nights organizing medication schedules for elderly parents while their siblings attend charity galas and business conferences. The night of Alana's gala changed everything. She was hosting her annual fundraiser for underprivileged children, one of those feel-good causes that looked impressive on social media and provided excellent tax deductions. I'd spent 3 weeks coordinating every detail. I'd interviewed 5 different caterers before finding one that met her exacting standards for both food quality and presentation. I'd worked with the florist to create centerpieces that photographed well under the ballroom's lighting. I'd coordinated with her personal shopper to select the perfect gown, then spent 2 hours steaming it and arranging her jewelry. The guest list included Connecticut's social elite, plus several tech executives Elena hoped to cultivate for future fundraising events. James Wright was the crown jewel invitation, a serial entrepreneur who'd just sold his 3rd company for $900 million. Everyone wanted his attention, his endorsement, his checkbook. I spent the evening in my usual role, floating between the kitchen and the ballroom, ensuring the caterers stayed on schedule and the servers kept the champagne flowing. I wore my standard black dress, the one Elena had once described as very professional, very appropriate for staff functions. I'd taken that as a compliment at the time. The guests began arriving at 7. By 8:30, the ballroom was filled with Connecticut's most influential families, all dressed in designer gowns and custom tuxedos, all discussing their latest business ventures and charitable contributions. I refilled champagne glasses, directed guests to the powder rooms, and handled the small crises that always arose during large events. Around 9 o'clock, I noticed James Wright talking with Marcus near the grand staircase. Wright had arrived alone, which was unusual for these events, and seemed genuinely interested in learning about the family's business operations rather than just making polite conversation. He was asking detailed questions about how they managed multiple companies and properties so efficiently, how they maintained such impressive financial organization across diverse investments. I was passing by with a tray of fresh champagne when Marcus's answer stopped me cold. "Oh, that's just Sarah," he said, gesturing toward me with his crystal tumbler. His voice was loud enough that several nearby conversations paused. "She's like our live-in bookkeeper. We joke that she's the most expensive maid we've ever had." The laughter started immediately. Sharp, delighted laughter from people who thought they were witnessing clever family humor. I felt my face burn, my hands go cold around the champagne tray. But Elena wasn't finished. "Honestly, we don't know what we'd do without her," she added, her voice carrying that particular tone she used when she wanted to sound generous while actually delivering an insult. "She's so good at maintaining things, organizing our lives. It's really all she's ever been good at." More laughter rippled through the crowd. Someone made a joke about wishing they had a Sarah of their own. Another guest mentioned how hard it was to find good help these days. I stood there holding the champagne, invisible and humiliated, while my family reduced 8 years of professional work to a servant's duties. James Wright looked uncomfortable. He tried to steer the conversation toward more respectful topics, but the damage was done. I finished distributing the champagne, excused myself to help with dinner service, and spent the rest of the evening hiding in the kitchen while my family's words echoed in my head. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the humiliation, feeling the sting of being turned into entertainment for strangers. At 2 in the morning, I gave up on sleep and made myself tea in the carriage house kitchen. At 3, I was still staring at the ceiling. At 4, I decided to do something productive with my insomnia. I went to my home office, a corner of the carriage house living room where I'd set up my desk and filing systems. Maybe reviewing the family's financial records would distract me from the embarrassment of the evening. I'd been managing their books for so long that the monthly reconciliation process was automatic. Bank statements, credit card bills, investment account summaries, expense categorizations, tax document preparation. But this time was different. This time, I was looking with the eyes of someone who'd just been called an expensive maid. This time, I was paying attention to details I'd previously accepted without question. The first anomaly I noticed was in Marcus's business expense deductions. I pulled up his Schedule C forms for the past 3 years and cross-referenced them with his actual business expenses. Under professional services, he'd been claiming my work as a legitimate business expense, deducting $85,000 annually for my property management and bookkeeping services. But what have he actually paid me for those services? I opened my personal banking records and calculated every bonus, every gift, every payment I'd received from Marcus over the past year. The total came to $24,300. He was claiming $85,000 in business deductions while paying me less than 30% of that amount. My hands started shaking as I pulled up Elena's financial records. Her trust fund statements showed regular transfers to accounts I didn't recognize. I cross-referenced the account numbers with my credit monitoring service and felt my stomach drop. There, in black and white, were credit cards I'd never opened. Cards with my social security number, my name, addresses I'd never lived at. The balances made me physically sick. $67,400 across 4 different cards, all past due, all destroying the credit score I'd worked years to build. I printed everything. Bank statements, tax returns, credit reports, account statements. The carriage house printer ran for over an hour, and with each page, my understanding of my situation became clearer and more devastating. Both Marcus and Elena had been listing the carriage house as rental property on their tax returns, claiming rental income deductions and property management expenses, while telling me I lived there rent-free out of family generosity. They were receiving substantial tax benefits for housing me while I provided unpaid labor to maintain their properties and manage their financial affairs. But the worst discovery was still coming. Mom's medical fund, the account I've been carefully managing with her Social Security payments, Dad's pension benefits, and her small savings showed withdrawals I didn't remember making. Large withdrawals with electronic signatures I'd never authorized. I cross-referenced the withdrawal dates with Marcus and Elena's personal expenses, and a sickening pattern emerged. $17,200 withdrawn on March 15th. The same day, Marcus booked his Bahamas vacation with his girlfriend. $23,800 taken on June 3rd, one day before Elena's kitchen renovation deposit was due. $12,500 removed on August 20th, matching exactly the down payment on Marcus's new Tesla. They'd been systematically draining our mother's medical fund, using it as their personal slush fund, while I killed myself managing her complex care needs and fighting with insurance companies to keep her in the home she loved. The sun was rising by the time I finished my initial review. I called in sick to my volunteer bookkeeping work at the local senior center and drove to the public library, where I spent 8 hours researching financial elder abuse, identity theft, employment law, and criminal fraud. The legal terminology was overwhelming, but the reality was crystal clear. My family had been committing multiple felonies against me and our mother for years. The next morning, I called my friend Lisa, a paralegal at Patterson and Associates downtown. We'd met in college and stayed close despite my increasingly isolated lifestyle. Lisa had always been suspicious of my living arrangement, occasionally asking pointed questions about why I wasn't building my own career or dating anyone seriously. "I need legal advice," I told her when she answered her phone. "Can we meet for coffee this afternoon? I'll bring documentation." We met at a quiet cafe in West Hartford, away from anyone who might recognize me. I brought 3 manila folders filled with printouts, organized chronologically like the good little bookkeeper I'd been trained to be. Lisa's expression grew darker as she reviewed each document. Sarah, she said after 20 minutes of silent reading, this isn't just exploitation, this is criminal fraud. Identity theft, tax evasion, elder financial abuse. The wage theft alone could be worth hundreds of thousands in damages. But they're my family, I said automatically, the words feeling hollow and rehearsed. Family doesn't steal from family, Lisa replied firmly. This isn't helping each other out during hard times. This is systematic financial abuse designed to keep you dependent while they profit from your labor. She explained my legal options while I took notes on a yellow legal pad. Civil lawsuit for wage theft and damages. Criminal complaints for identity theft and elder abuse. IRS fraud reporting for tax evasion. Each option felt surreal, like we were discussing someone else's life rather than my own reality. Over the next 6 weeks, I built my case with the methodical precision of the accountant I'd been trained to be. Every transaction documented, every discrepancy highlighted, every illegal activity cross-referenced with supporting evidence and organized in color-coded binders. I opened my own bank account at a completely different institution, Webster Bank instead of the First National where my family banked. I pulled comprehensive credit reports from all 3 bureaus and photographed every fraudulent account Elena had opened in my name. I created detailed spreadsheets tracking 8 years of unpaid labor, calculating wages at market rates for bookkeeping services, property management, elder care coordination, and household administration. The wage theft calculation alone was staggering. Market rate for a bookkeeper with my experience and responsibilities, $75 per hour. Property management services, $60 per hour. Elder care coordination, $45 per hour. Over 8 years, working an average of 70 hours per week, they owed me $412,000 in unpaid wages. Add the identity theft damages, the fraudulent tax deductions, and the stolen funds from Mom's medical account, and the total came to $563,800. My breaking point came during week 5 of my investigation. I was reviewing property records online when I discovered something that made me physically ill. The family home, Mom's sanctuary for 43 years, was quietly listed for sale. Marcus and Elena had signed the paperwork without telling me, planning to split the $4 million proceeds while moving Mom to a state-run Medicaid facility. All while I'd been working myself into exhaustion to keep her comfortable in familiar surroundings, managing her increasingly complex medical needs, and fighting with insurance companies to maintain her quality of life. That night, I made my decision. I wasn't going to confront them first, wasn't going to give them a chance to gaslight me or manipulate me back into compliance. I was going straight to the authorities with my evidence, letting the legal system handle what my family had refused to address honestly. The IRS fraud division took my report seriously. Financial crimes leave extensive paper trails, and I provided them with 8 years of meticulously organized evidence in clearly labeled binders. The investigator, a woman named Janet Chen, spent 2 hours reviewing my documentation and asked for digital copies of everything. Adult Protective Services opened an investigation into Mom's case within 48 hours of my report. The caseworker, David Martinez, was particularly concerned about the systematic drainage of her medical fund and the secret plans to sell her home without proper guardianship procedures. The state attorney general's white-collar crime unit requested copies of all my evidence and opened their own investigation into the tax fraud and identity theft charges. Detective Sarah Williams explained that financial exploitation of elderly family members was a growing problem they took very seriously. While the investigations proceeded, I made the hardest decision of my life. I moved Mom to Sunset Manor, a beautiful assisted living facility in Farmington that specialized in Alzheimer's care. The monthly cost was $6,400, which I paid from my small savings account while waiting for the legal process to resolve. Mom was confused by the change, but seemed calmer away from the chaos of the family home. The professional staff understood her condition better than I'd been able to manage alone, and she began participating in activities and socializing with other residents. For the first time in months, she seemed genuinely happy. Marcus and Elena noticed Mom's absence immediately, of course. They called and texted frantically, demanding to know where she was and threatening legal action if I didn't return her home immediately. I forwarded their messages to Detective Williams as additional evidence of their controlling behavior. The confrontation happened exactly 2 weeks after I'd filed my reports with authorities. Elena's lawyer had called, requesting a family meeting to discuss Sarah's concerning behavior regarding mother's care and to formalize my caretaker responsibilities with proper legal documentation. I walked into the conference room at Morrison, Caldwell and Associates with my own attorney, Rebecca Patterson from Lisa's firm. Elena and Marcus were already seated with their lawyer, Stephen Morrison, looking confident and slightly annoyed at what they clearly viewed as my latest dramatic overreaction. "Sarah," Elena began before anyone else could speak, "we need to discuss this ridiculous situation with Mother. You can't just move her without consulting the family." "Actually," I said, placing my briefcase on the polished conference table, "I can. I'm her legal healthcare proxy, as designated in the documents I helped you prepare 3 years ago." I opened my briefcase and removed copies of all my evidence, organized in neat stacks. Rebecca had coached me to stay calm and factual, letting the documentation speak for itself. "You called me your expensive maid," I told Marcus, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through my veins. "You told James Wright and 50 other people that I was your live-in bookkeeper, like I was hired help rather than family. Well, hired help gets paid fair wages for their work." I slid the wage calculation spreadsheet across the table. "I've calculated market rates for the professional services I've provided over the past 8 years. Bookkeeping, property management, elder care coordination. You owe me $412,000 in unpaid wages, plus overtime compensation and benefits you've never provided." The room went silent. Elena's face went white. Marcus started to bluster about family obligations and ungrateful attitudes, but Stephen Morrison cut him off with a sharp gesture. "Furthermore," I continued, "the IRS is investigating your fraudulent business deductions, claiming my services while vastly underpaying for them. Adult Protective Services has opened a case regarding the systematic theft from our mother's medical fund. The state attorney general is reviewing criminal charges for identity theft and financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult." I placed copies of my credit reports on the table, with Elena's fraudulent accounts highlighted in yellow marker. "Elena, you've destroyed my credit rating by opening accounts in my name without permission. That's identity theft, a federal felony with penalties up to 15 years in prison." Rebecca placed additional documents on the table. "My client has 48 hours of recorded conversations with family members discussing these fraudulent activities, obtained legally as part of her elder care responsibilities. The evidence has been reviewed by multiple law enforcement agencies." Marcus found his voice first. "Sarah, this is insane. We're your family. We've given you a place to live, supported you. You've exploited me," I interrupted. "You've stolen from our mother's medical care fund to pay for vacations and luxury purchases, while I managed her complex health needs for free. You've claimed massive tax deductions for my professional services while paying me less than minimum wage. You've damaged my credit rating and financial future for your own benefit." Elena tried a different approach. "Sarah, please, we can work this out. We're family. We love you." "Family doesn't steal," I replied, standing to leave. "Love doesn't require financial exploitation. I'm not negotiating. The authorities will handle everything from here." "What do you want from us?" Marcus demanded, finally understanding that this wasn't a tantrum he could manage with gifts and empty promises. "I want you to face the consequences of your actions," I said. I want our mother to receive proper care without her medical fund being your personal bank account. I want my credit rating restored and my stolen wages returned. I want to never see either of you again. The legal resolution took 4 months. Marcus pleaded guilty to tax evasion, elder financial abuse, and fraudulent business practices. His total restitution and fines came